The 1v1 interview series is a production of the Boss Rush network of podcasts. Visit bossrush.net to listen to our podcast and read our articles, game reviews, and more. You can also follow us on Twitter at Boss Rush Network to stay up to date with our content. Thank you for listening. Hello, everyone, and welcome to 1v1 with Boss Rush Network. I'm your host, Celeste Roberts. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Alex Orlando, an associate editor and writer at Discover Magazine. Hello, Alex.
Hey Celeste, thanks so much for having me here.
Thank you for joining me. I had reached out to you a few months ago to see if this is something you'd be interested in doing, and you had a really big and exciting life event that was happening before we could connect like this. Would you like to share?
Absolutely, I did indeed. Yeah, I got married at the end of September 30th. My wife and I had a beautiful wedding out here. We live in Milwaukee, and we got married about 45 minutes west of the city. It was a barn venue, but I feel like that almost didn't do it justice because it was like its own little property, and they had like the little fairy lights in the trees, and it was perfect. It was an amazing day.
Congratulations. I know that had to be a wonderful day.
Definitely. It was, we kind of extended the fun a little bit. We didn't leave for our honeymoon until the Monday after. So that way we got to kind of like hang out with friends and family a little bit for a few days after the wedding. And yeah, it was just nice to have a little bit of extra time with everyone before we jetted off to California where we spent a week.
Ooh, which part of California or just different cities?
No, we were in the Bay Area kind of the whole time. I had lived in the Bay Area for a few years when I went to grad school for journalism, and yeah, I really loved that part of the country, especially the Point Reyes seashore, which is kind of north of the Golden Gate Bridge, and just really fell in love with like the scenery there and the wildlife. So we got a cute little Airbnb in this kind of, very small, cute little coastal town and just spent a week there with that as our home base.
Oh gosh, that sounds really relaxing.
It was nice. I think we needed it after the wedding stress just to be like, oh, we just get to chill now. This is nice.
Oh wow, thank you so much for making time, especially with all that excitement going on. I mean, do you feel different? That's
You
the
know,
common question, right?
it is. It's funny. I've been like thinking about that whenever someone else asks me it. But yeah, it's there's a nice comfort to be able to like refer to your partner and say like my wife. So like I've been getting a lot of mileage out of that, and like
Ooh.
just having a wedding ring is something that like I think I like more than I expected to. Like, oh yeah, it's a nice little reminder of like your person. So that's been very sweet and nice.
Oh, I love that. Oh my gosh, you made me cry. That's really sweet, and oh, that's awesome. Well, Alex, so what can you tell us about yourself as a professional?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a journalist and magazine editor. I'm an editor for Discover Magazine. We are a national science publication, based in Waukesha, Wisconsin, about half an hour west of Milwaukee. And for Discover, I do kind of a lot for the print magazine because we have both like a physical print magazine and a website. Um, I would say I probably do the majority of my work for the print magazine, editing kind of features, like longer magazine stories, anywhere from 1,500 to 3,000 word, kind of longer pieces that tend to be more narrative focused. And I also edit shorter stories in the front of the magazine, kind of what we call the front of the book, which are, if you pick up a magazine, there's usually like little shorter articles that take up a page. And, a lot of magazines are structured where they'll have this section, this front of the book at the very beginning, for kind of little appetizer stories to kind of prepare you for, reading longer pieces in the future well. Um, so I edit a lot for the magazine, reading other people's features. Also do that for our website, and I would say about maybe twice a year I get the chance to write longer features for the magazine myself, and I'm also kind of writing web stories for online on kind of a rolling basis. So lots of different hats, but I love it because it lets me, flex my muscles as a writer and as an editor, and never a dull moment.
Gosh, I really respect all the work you do because it's it's kind of draining to edit other people's work sometimes, not in a bad way, but especially if you're doing it multiple times. Like, okay, here's your first draft with edits, first round of edits, second round, however many rounds it would take,
Sure.
and the words can kind of start blending together a little bit.
Definitely. Yeah, the words start blending together, and I feel like the biggest thing I've learned from I really hadn't edited professionally at all before this job, but in the past few years, kind of ramping up as an editor from shorter stories to longer features, is just having the confidence to kind of trust your instincts and to be like, no, that is like the right call. Like
Hmm.
this section doesn't belong there, or we need, a quicker introduction. Like just trusting that, you know, you can exercise that judgment and help the writer make the piece better.
That's what editing is about. It's not a good editor, which I'm sure you are because you're smart and you have a good personality. It's to encourage the writer, to make them a better writer, to help their piece really sing. And I'm sure you probably have people editing your pieces too, right? A second pair of eyes.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we actually have that built into our process where every story for the print magazine, we will have primary editors on that story where you're the one kind of taking it through rounds one, two, and three. And then when you've got it to a place where, you need another set of eyes or you've kind of exhausted all that you can find with the piece, we send it to a top editor who kind of edits the edits and is that second set of eyes, like, looking for things that the first editor might have missed, or offering their feedback to you about the piece. And I think that is kind of this, for me at least, this magic step where like pieces really go from good to great.
Hmm.
Because there's only so much you can catch as one person, even if you're looking at it, as an editor or as an advocate for the reader, like having that second person just kind of look over your shoulder and be, oh, there's something we can make better too. Can really, exactly like you said, make it sing and give it that extra, pump it needs.
That's really important to me. And the way you're describing it is not just a process, but it sounds like you work in a very collaborative environment where people are there to not punish people for not getting it right, like right away, like, oh man, how could you not get this perfect? Yeah. And more of, hey, we're all human.
Hmm.
And of course, I'm going to see things that you might have missed because I'm probably also thinking a different way.
Right. Yeah, totally. And, usually it's a sense of gratitude when like I get comments back from a top editor rather than being like, oh, they're nitpicking something I missed, or like it's a criticism of my work. When it's
Hmm.
more, I am lucky to have like a very collaborative environment where, together I think we see ourselves as like we are advocates for the reader as an editor. So we're working together to like make it a smoother experience for whoever's picking up the piece, 3, 4, 5 months down the line when it runs in print, and making sure that they're having a good experience. So I think thinking about it that way helps us kind of, remember that we're all on the same team.
Okay, so that many months, that was my next question. How long does it take for a piece to go from, I guess, conception or idea, or does someone come to you and pitch the idea? What's the whole process like from beginning to
Yeah,
end?
no, it's a great question. There's a lot of variability. So sometimes we will have an idea for a piece that we want to write on staff, and we'll kind of talk about that internally. We have regular pitch meetings twice a year where we come together as a staff, me and my fellow editors, and we present stories that we would either like to write personally or we'd like to assign out to other people. So there's a good number of stories that are staff generated ideas. And then the others come in just kind of through various emails. Like we have one of my colleagues is our features editor, so feature pitches get sent to them, and they kind of evaluate them on, is this compelling? Is this going to be engaging for the
Hmm.
average reader? You do a lot of vetting in that pitch phase because I'd say the biggest thing I see in terms of pitches that don't hit the mark for us is people just pitching a story that wouldn't be a fit for our publication. and getting the feeling that, like, okay, this person might need to make themselves a little bit more familiar with like the types of stories we do before they pitch. Um, so we do get a lot of stories that way, just from people pitching to the magazine, sending emails to us. That's usually like, 1 page summary of kind of what the story is, why it matters, and then how this person would go about reporting it. Because you usually want to give the editor a sense that, okay, I can handle this. Like, I have the reporting chops, I have the writing expertise to like deliver on this thing that I'm promising, so that you will, basically agree to assign me a piece, and pay me X amount of money to write the story. Um, and then once we make the assignment, we kind of settle on a rate with the writer. Usually offer like X rate for X number of words, and there's some negotiating there sometimes. And then once we've kind of settled on a rate and a word count, then we officially assign the piece. And then the writer has usually about a month to turn it around. So that's doing all the interviews, doing the research required, and kind of compiling it into a first draft. Um, and then once that first draft kind of lands in one of our inboxes, I would say there's probably another month and a half that we have to kind of take that story through production, from a first draft to being ready to hand up to our graphic designer for laying out in the magazine. Um, and in that, like, in between time, there's lots of little steps. Like, we do the original round of edits that I was talking about, where it's the primary editor. So for a piece that I'm editing, I would send it back maybe 1 to 2, sometimes 3 times if it needs some work. And then it goes to the top editor, and they're editing the edits. And after
Mm.
that, it goes to fact check. So we have our writers kind of pretty thoroughly annotate every sentence in a story that is a fact and can be factually verified. Uh, and when I first started here and I saw like what was required of these drafts, it's kind of crazy because they will have like, 100 plus annotations, like footnotes in the draft, all linking to like a different study or a different part of the recording, because you're giving this independent fact checker all the tools they need to go through the story and be like, every sentence that we're saying is factually correct. Um, and that takes about a week for the fact checker to kind of go through. They're also calling all of these sources, so all the people who are quoted in the story, scientists for Discover, they're calling up all of these experts and kind of re-interviewing them, and basically saying, things like, you gave this impression, is that accurate? Like, or the writer used this metaphor to describe your work, is that a fair comparison? um, for things where you are taking more like literary license, you still need to be able to make sure that it's accurate. So that can even be fact checked just by checking back with the experts. Um, and then after it comes back from fact check, the editor has to kind of incorporate the corrections that were found, because sometimes it's more of an art than a science, in the sense that a fact checker might flag something and say, oh, well, the source said this, but here's the real technical definition. And it could be kind of like splitting hairs. So you have to make that call as an editor, like, okay, we're getting a little too in the weeds here. Like, I think what's here originally is fine. Um, and then we send it to our copy editor, who is incredible. And she's also kind of like a secondary top editor, because, she's editing for grammar, punctuation, making sure that we're following AP style, which we use. Um, and after that, it goes back to the author for their kind of last read, and they go through, they see all the changes that have been made, have a chance to kind of massage any language they might like, and flag any things that look wonky to them. Um, and then it goes off to our graphic designer, and they kind of create a beautiful layout with the story. As an editor, we also send them a visual plan, which I really love doing, and was kind of a new skill set for me. But thinking about like what the piece is going to look like in print, and basically compiling images and saying, okay, I think this could run really big because this is a really like striking image of a microscope, or a research center in Antarctica, or whatever image you're finding to illustrate the story. Um, and then the graphic designer takes the that plan, the final copy, and creates like a layout. And then there's kind of a second stage where rather than working in a Word document, you're now working in uh, an Adobe program like InCopy or InDesign. You're looking at what it would look like if you were holding the magazine in your hands and the story was incorporated with the visuals. And you're writing captions and giving it some last reads, and that's when I try and pick up the magazine or the story at that point, like I'm a reader picking up the magazine at the airport, and just what would I notice? Like, is there anything weird about the phrasing? Or, if I'm a casual observer, how am I going to process this story? So that's kind of fun to do, like a last read of it. And then we say goodbye. We send it to the printer, and it can be usually about a month after that. So I would say anywhere from 4 to 6 months to kind of go from conception to print.
That's an insane amount of work, and I hope that listeners appreciate that next time they're looking at a magazine, especially Discover.
Yeah, no, it's something like I don't think I appreciated until I saw the back end exactly, and like you do see how much work goes into it. Um, especially all these individual steps. But um, I just think that's so important for like ensuring the accuracy of the story, ensuring that it's balanced and that we're including quotes and sources from diverse viewpoints. And like, we are not only quoting, white men who like make up a predominance of academia and science. And like, you're being conscious of the reader and diversifying your perspective, but also making sure that they're informed and making sure that the story is, clear and accessible above all. Because I'd say that's probably the biggest guiding principle is, we wanted science to be something that you can pick up if you're a kid, if you're an adult, if you're, 9 or 90, you should be able to read about science in a way that doesn't make you feel like an outsider or make you feel like you don't understand.
So, would you say that you have always had an interest in science? How did you get on this path?
Yeah, I definitely did not, which cracks me up when I think about it. And I think, like, it does make me more passionate as an advocate for science because I think I just wasn't exposed to it the right way in school, where, a lot of science classes I took, physics and biology. I think the math intimidated me as as a wordy person who feels more comfortable with books. I think some of the complexity of the language intimidated me, and it was only really as an adult. My first job out of college was doing copywriting for a hospital system in Connecticut where I grew up. And I was getting to interview doctors and write about what they were doing, and kind of coming at it, as a writer, as an English major, and looking at, okay, what's the story here? Do I understand the science? I know if I understand it, I can explain it to other people. How can I explain what medical breakthrough this is and what discovery this is? And it was kind of through that job that really like helped me become passionate about science and science writing, and started to read other magazines after that, and follow other outlets, and realized it's something that I really liked.
Wow, that's awesome. And you don't know until you're doing something sometimes if it clicks or not.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, I haven't done scientific writing. I think maybe in college I had to write some kind of paper, but it was mostly a literary analysis or
Hmm.
something like that. But you can transfer those skills to tell these kinds of stories. And I don't think people realize that because so did you okay, so you have your bachelor's and your master's degree. Are they both in journalism?
They are not. My bachelor's is in English lit. So I got a literature degree in college. I actually flirted with the journalism program, but ended up kind of bouncing off of it because I think I was just more like drawn to like, okay, I really want to analyze literature. Like maybe I'll get my PhD someday.
Hmm.
And that was kind of the path that I was on for a little bit. Was like, okay, I'll probably get my bachelor's and then, maybe get a master's in English or go on to get my PhD and teach. And kind of got steered away from that path by some professors who were younger when I was in college, and I think they knew like how much the landscape was changing and just how hard it is out there as a humanities professor, and like how many struggles you have to overcome just to even get a foot in the door as like an adjunct and as a full timer. So I definitely considered that that reality and kind of thought about it for a while. Um, I know at one point we had both talked about teaching English overseas. So while
Hmm.
I was kind of figuring out my next move, I uh, was in living in South Korea for a year, kind of teaching English as a second language and traveling a bit, but also kind of thinking about next steps. And after that job, I kind of continued the medical writing I was doing in Connecticut, and I ended up getting a job in Houston, Texas, for 2 years for this medical organization called the Texas Medical Center. And it's basically this group of like 40 to 50 hospitals of various sizes. They have a massive cancer center, they have like various massive research centers, but they also have like Ronald McDonald House and like very smaller, scale kind of community service type organizations. Um, but the medical center that housed all these different like hospitals and healthcare orgs had a magazine that I wrote for, and that was my first time like really taking what I had done doing healthcare communications and looking at it as a storyteller and looking at it as okay, I have people, professors, just community members in this medical center picking up this magazine. How are they going to experience this news as a reader? So we would kind of cover um, anything and everything happening in the medical center. I wrote stories on stem cell research, wrote stories on cancer research. We were near NASA, obviously, in Houston. So there were a few aerospace stories that I got to write that was very cool. Um, and I think that's just when I fell in love with kind of that process of interviewing really smart people and then trying to synthesize what they said and make it something that people can enjoy. Um, and after I did that for 2 years, really realizing I wanted to keep doing that and learn more skills and kind of broaden my toolkit. That's what kind of led me to apply to grad programs in journalism, and then led me to get my master's.
Awesome. So is the process very strenuous? Were you stressed out a lot in grad school?
I was, but I don't know if this is true about other grad school programs, but I feel like in mine there's just a lot of collective anxiety because you get a lot of high performing people in the same program, so everyone's anxiety is kind of like reverberating off each other. Where like you're talking about deadlines, you're talking about assignments, so like you almost kind of create an echo chamber for like the stress that everyone's feeling. So I think we were, and I think it was real. But I think kind of like once you're working a job that may have comparable levels of stress, because you're not talking about it as much, it feels less intense once you're out of it, I think. Um, but yeah, definitely, the first semester they kind of treat it like a newsroom boot camp, where you have this class that's the foundation of the semester. It's 4 to 5 days a week for like 3.5 hours, and you're learning how to write a news story. You're writing how to conduct an interview, how to structure it. Like it's really a crash course because you have people coming from such different walks of life. Some people coming straight from college, some people who had worked for a bit, had various roles, journalistic and not. So there's really like this onboarding process to get everyone out on a baseline. Um, and then you kind of go into your various like concentrations. What do you want to study? Because there was an audio program, there was a video journalism program, and there was a narrative writing program. Were kind of three of the big pillars. And I started by taking a bit of everything, like thinking I would sample the buffet and see what I liked. And I, you know, kind of surprised myself by being like, after trying all these things, I do really still love narrative. I still love written storytelling, and kind of made my way back there and did my master's thesis as kind of um, a written narrative story, um, and kind of focused on long form journalism basically for my last year when you really got to focus on your specialty.
Wow. So how long is your thesis?
It was not that long. It was 2,500 words. I think
Okay.
I think that surprised me too. I was expecting, when you hear like master's thesis or graduate thesis, like you expect this big thing that you're just going to plop on the desk and it's going to be like 20 pages long. Um, but what I love what they did is they really treated it like a professional program. They wanted to give you things that you could take out and sell and publish as a magazine story. So I was basically writing my first ever feature for my thesis, and doing the same process, the same kind of labor intensive work. And whether I was doing it in grad school or for Discover, it's still around a month of work to go from I have an idea, I have a pitch to here's my first draft. And you could turn it around quicker if you wanted to, but I would say like generally that's kind of just how long it takes to interview people and pull everything together.
Oh my gosh. It's a process, and then it's kind of like herding cats whenever you have to interview somebody.
It totally is.
So, when you were saying that your thesis was about 2,500 words, right?
Mm,
One of my professors in my English degree, his dissertation is 700 pages,
wow.
and this was back on a typewriter. Yes.
I'm just thinking about the man hours required to like manually plunk away at that. Like, how many hours do we spend sitting? That's crazy.
It's on Dylan Thomas.
Hmm.
And I think that he actually went to Great Britain to see where Dylan Thomas lived and did live research. 700 pages. It's divided into two little books.
That's amazing. That's the kind of thing that makes me a little like relieved. Be like, okay, good thing I didn't go for that PhD because then I have to write my 500 word magnum opus.
Can you can you imagine? I so how long, and I actually do have your Discover magazine. I guess it would be like your collection of work. I have
Yeah,
it.
yeah, kind of like my author page.
Yes, yes, I have that pulled up. And how long are your articles typically? Or it varies?
Yeah, I think it totally varies on the medium. If I'm writing something for our website, those are usually anywhere from 800 to 1400 words. Want them to be things that are like, you know, not super bite-sized, but like you could read in maybe like 5 or 6 minutes.
Hmm.
Um, and then for the print magazine, like I have some longer features on that page that could be anywhere from 2,500 to 3,000 plus words for longer pieces.
So, with all of this work, writing and editing, do you have very unusually long days, or you have a typical like 8 to 5 schedule?
Yeah, I mean it's pretty compact in that 9 to 5 window. Like, I'm lucky in that my company like values its employees' time and mental health and doesn't totally grind us into the dust to like, to produce. Um, so they're very like good about, you shouldn't be working outside of your 9 to 5 hours. And honestly, apart from a few moments where I was reporting and writing something myself, and you do just need to put in a little bit extra time for finishing up an interview or finishing
Hmm.
up a draft. For the most part, like, yeah, I'm very contentedly able to keep it kind of in that 9 to 5 window.
That's awesome. So, what would your advice be to someone listening who's thinking, oh, I'd really love to be a journalist? Would you say that there are some challenges to consider that maybe you didn't realize until you got into this field?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the big thing I didn't realize, and you kind of get insulated from it in grad school, where you're talking about the craft and you're among other people who are so passionate that um, the reality that the industry is really really struggling is something that um, I think took me aback when I graduated, even after having so many discussions about it in grad school. It was a very different experience to talk in an abstract way about the struggles of the journalism industry, and then to, um, get out and be working for a journalist just a few years and see like um, every few weeks there'll be a round of layoffs at kind of different media publications who are doing great work, and it's really just because the revenue model for journalism, this ad model where um, you know as I'm sure like sites and magazines and newspapers are dependent on advertisers, and that's just not as lucrative as it once was. And um, I think kind of adjusting to that reality like helped me appreciate a lot more kind of having a good landing place and having a good team that I can work for. But it's definitely something to consider when thinking about just kind of the stability of the industry in the future. Um, and I would say the other side to that coin, which is something I didn't realize, is how transferable the skills you learn as a journalist really are. Um, if you're interviewing people, then that's going to build up your skills at um, just engaging with other people and being curious and inquisitive and challenging your perspective. If you can um, translate information into a story and make it compelling and engaging, then you can do anything in communications or kind of related fields. Like it's such a transferable skill set, and I think that's something that really lifts me up when, like, it can be discouraging to see news of, like, more layoffs at another media company. The fact that these skills are so broadly transferable, knowing that, like, even if someday it does take me away from journalism, I'll be able to apply them in an even number of industries and fields. Um, and I guess the other biggest thing I learned, kind of doing it myself, was just to always be an advocate for yourself. Whether that's asking for more money as a freelancer, whether that's kind of advocating for a writer as an editor, and just kind of really um, yeah, making sure that the work that you do is going to be able to sustain you, and kind of just making sure that you're protected financially in that way.
That is so important. And things are getting more expensive every year, everything. And so, are most journalists contract employees, or can they be hired on full time with a publication?
Yeah, it's super interesting, and something I didn't really learn the nuances of until I started doing it. Um, and I would say there are probably more freelancers and freelance journalists working now who do get contracted at various publications. That may be on a story by story basis where they're getting paid for individual stories. And some freelancers even have like kind of a recurring contract where they are guaranteed to write X number of stories a month. We have several writers for our website who are kind of on contract web writers, so they will write 3 to 4 stories for us a month or so. Um, and then there are staffers, kind of people like me who are more, I would say, more in editing positions than writing positions. I think there's just more editing positions available, and that doesn't mean that you're not going to be also doing writing, kind of like all of we are at Discover. um, it just means that you're going to be on the staff, and you are kind of managing a lot of different things internally. You're editing pieces. Um, so there are those kind of more stable, I think, staff jobs for for landing at a place and doing work kind of for a publication or newspaper or magazine.
Yeah, it's if you go on LinkedIn, it's amazing how many freelance contract roles pop up for writing, which some people they want that or they want it on the side or they prefer
Hmm.
having that freedom full time. But in your position, for example, it is kind of comforting having that settled feeling. It just depends on what do you want,
Sure.
what's best for your situation. But thank you for saying that about advocating for yourself. That's something I struggle with because I kind of have imposter syndrome where, oh, there are much better writers than I am, or oh, I've never done this before. How am I going to do it? But you can always learn, and especially what you're saying about the adaptability. There, if you have a good leader, a good mentor, a good team who sees your potential and just thinks, okay, I can teach you how to adapt and gain the skills you need or the mindset, the framework.
Sure.
I think it sounds like you've been very lucky in that respect.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, and yeah, one thing I was thinking, just what would you tell someone who is interested in journalism? Um, just read a lot and write a lot, and don't don't be afraid um, to pitch your ideas to publications. It's totally not unheard of, even if you've never been published somewhere, to have a really good story idea and email an editor, and they can evaluate the strength of your writing in your pitch and kind of make a decision on whether they want to assign something. So if it's something that you want to break into and aren't sure, you definitely don't need to go to grad school for it. Like it is a craft like any other, but it's one that you can learn with kind of a low barrier to entry just by putting yourself out there.
You never know until you try, right?
Totally. And I think there's a sense that like oh, like editors will laugh at me if like they read my pitch and it's really bad, and it's like, no, we're just going to read it and move on to the next thing. um, so yeah, I think just kind of pushing past that anxiety of how will my work be perceived, and just kind of yeah, just practicing your writing and getting it in front of other people and continuing to get better at it.
And I'm sure you've had an experience with brutal editors before who, oh my gosh, it's a very humbling feeling.
Yes. Yeah, humility may not be the first emotion you feel when you see all that red and you're just like, oh
Oh,
no.
what am I doing? Why did I go into this field? Why?
Right.
But it, but most editors, a good one, I guess in my, I haven't done your kind of journalism, but just with people reviewing my work, people who have like almost a teacher's heart who see that seed that has been planted and they just want to make it even better. And they, I don't know, that's how I thrive.
Yeah, I think you're totally on point. I mean, that's something I try and do in the edits I will leave on a piece, is I try to ask a lot of questions. So that way it doesn't seem like I am criticizing something, like I am
Hmm.
genuinely wanting to know this information that is missing from the piece. So, you're kind of gently nudging the writer to be like, well, what about this, this person? Did you consider their perspective? Or what about this like aspect of the science?
Mm.
Like, I don't know how that works. And that way you can kind of get them to also consider it and work it into the writing without feeling like they're being chastised or like wrapped on the knuckles for not doing it right the first time. Because it really is just kind of that, like, the thing I love about it is that open, like, free form collaboration. You're working together, you're co-creating the piece to make it as good as it can be.
And you probably had to shift a little bit because you were used to writing a few different styles and then you come to discover and it's like, whoa.
Yeah, no, very much so. I went from kind of doing the majority of my time was spent writing, and now very much the majority of my time is spent editing. But it's been very cool to learn something that's so different and realize, oh, I also find this just as rewarding as being on the writing side, because I still get to think critically about narrative. I still get to think critically about story structure and even sentence level mechanics, and like what makes a sentence really pop off the page. So that's been a fun kind of journey realization to just learn more about the other side.
I love that. I have your author page up right now, and I I really love the names of these stories. The titles. My favorite one is "Swearing Like a Sailor May Not Be Such a Bad Thing," because I know you haven't heard me speak much, but I definitely do drop some words, some choice words in my
Hmm.
daily life.
Yep, I'm with you there.
But you have such a repertoire. And how long have you been with Discover?
I've been with Discover for 3 years.
Three
3 years
years.
this October.
Okay, wow, that's a good amount of time. Oh, okay. I even see the hidden science behind 2020's biggest video games, and there's a little picture of Animal Crossing: New Horizons. Which do you play that? I play that.
I learned about that through my friends who play it. I
Oh,
follow it on Twitter. I've watched YouTube videos, but have not dove in myself. No.
I don't know if you should start. You might not be able to stop. But out of these stories, I know it's probably like picking your favorite child, right? What I'm about to ask you. Is there one that you favor over others? And it could be for any reason. Either it's the topic, the memories, the people you interviewed,
Hmm.
anything at all.
Yeah. I think my favorite that I've written kind of for Discover in the past few years was a story I wrote last year on near-death experiences. Um,
Ooh.
and I think it's called something like the science of near-death experiences, or um, but that was one that was kind of the first story I ever pitched to Discover, um, and it was my first week on the job, and I kind of came like very excited with like my three pitches for my new boss, um, and one of them was something that a friend who's a scientist had kind of cued me in on. One of my good college friends works now as a scientist and follows a lot of research, and also kind of like very sadly has a personal connection to this issue because he recently lost his dad in the past 4 years.
Oh.
So he, as a very intellectual person, kind of started reading a lot about this and reading a lot about like the science of near-death experiences, which are a lot of the time refers to people who have a heart attack, some kind of cardiac arrest situation, and are then resuscitated. Um, and he found one researcher in particular who is really trying to study this, like objectively, empirically, like how can we study these experiences that people have where, their heart stops and then they are brought back. Um, because there are commonalities there. So I kind of pitched that to my editor that first week, and she was like, "I really like this. I don't see a place for it now." And we sat on it for like a year and a half.
A
Um,
year and a half?
yeah, just because there were,
Wow.
we were a bi-monthly magazine. We do 6 issues a year, so there's definitely a limit to the number of features that you can run. So this was one of those. We like this, but we're going to back burner it. Um, and then, a year and a half later, we had a pitch meeting where I brought it up again. And that was kind of like, well, we now had a new editor evaluating this piece in my former editor's same role. Um, and, said, okay, we like the story. We're going to move forward on it. Um, and it was just such a wild experience for me, kind of um, reporting that story and researching it. um, I come in kind of from a not religious background, so I kind of was very very curious about just looking at what these experiences are and what kind of scientists have been able to figure out. um, and I think the wildest thing is learning that there have been people who have been studying this for, 50 years, 40 years, and have still not necessarily learned, like, what is going on in the brain with people who have these very distinct recollections. Things like, um, you know, following a bright light, things like having kind of like these almost panoramic experiences where you go through all of your memories, and like it's kind of like your life flashes before your eyes, is a real physiological phenomenon that these people experience. um, so there are all these commonalities in these people who have been had a cardiac arrest and brought back. um, and just kind of learning how different the perspectives of the scientists are. Um, some of the scientists who are like, these experiences are real, they, suggest that there is some kind of consciousness after we die. We just can't measure it yet. And then there are other scientists who are very hard and fast and think that like this is all neurobiology. This is all because humans have brains and these are things happening in our brains, and we can explain X, Y, and Z, for these scientific reasons. Um, and I think what really was, blew my mind as a reporter was, taking some of these explanations back to the scientists and having them go, actually, that explanation doesn't hold up. One of the examples being that people have these experiences because, there's not enough blood flowing to the brain. Um, and it's kind of like a hallucination thing. But they have done studies, and some of these people who, have a cardiac arrest and are brought back, their brains are actually more oxygenated in that window because more blood is pumping to that part of the body. So that hypothesis, that theory doesn't really work. So they're still trying to figure out what accounts for these like really vivid, powerful experiences that change people's lives. People have an NDE and then they divorce their wife of 40 years. They change careers. Like
Oh my
it's,
gosh.
it's a profound mystical experience, is the way that the scientific literature itself describes it, because it can change your whole worldview. Um, so I think that's my favorite, just because it was such a roller coaster to report it, where everything I learned kind of was, upending what I had learned previously. So trying to write that story and kind of manage all those tensions competing against each other, made it really fun as a writer to kind of amp up that tension and show how different the perspectives are.
I love, I don't know if love is the right word, but it's interesting that the first editor said there's no place for this. So I guess a pitch you have to be lucky, right? Like you have
Yes.
to have someone who agrees with that story, agrees with that idea.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of a timing thing. We have had say no to pitches just because like it's purely space economy, and it's like we don't have an issue this can fit in. Sometimes we'll get a pitch that's just in the perfect time to run in a particular issue, because our issues are kind of loosely themed. So we've had issues in recent months, one that was dedicated to artificial intelligence, one that was dedicated to kind of the future of transit, so self-driving cars and electric vehicles and things
Mm.
like that. So sometimes you'll get a pitch that's just a perfect fit for that issue theme, and that's really nice because you can slot it in. But other times, like yeah, great pitches, that could be a great story for Discover, for example. You might have to say no to just because the timing's off.
Mm. And so does each year have, or each month have a theme that you have to stick to?
Yeah, they're not recurring. Like we will kind of loosely create an issue theme based on stories for a lot of issues. So we got a bunch of stories recently that like all were kind of pointing at the same idea of what's happening on like the underbelly of science. So one story, for example, is on skeletons that get donated to universities and how they are kind of acquired, and like learning that like it may not always be the most above book ways that like some of these universities like acquire the skeletons that they
Oh my
use in their classrooms. So we have
God.
a story coming in that I'm so excited to read just based on that premise. But that fits into this loose theme of the underbelly of science, so we kind of bundled it together. um, and we do have two issues that are, or three, excuse me, that are recurring, same theme, same month every year. In January, we have a big state of science issue where we kind of
Ooh.
talk about yeah, we just got, I don't have it with me, or I'd show you our new issue, but it's basically the top science stories of 2022. Um, so we had a story about the James Webb Space Telescope and all of the incredible images that NASA is getting from that. We had a story about them finding the ship the Endurance that Ernest Shackleton, one of the first explorers, crashed off the coast of Antarctica. So kind of just looking at all of these disciplines and looking at, what are the biggest science stories of the year, um, and then rounding them all up. And they're kind of little bite-sized stories. So that's a very fun puzzle of an issue to put together. And then we also have one that's climate themed every May, and one that is themed around medicine and health and kind of medical breakthroughs that comes out in July and August.
Oh,
And and
wow.
apart from that, we kind of curate these loose themes as stories come in.
If someone looks at your author page, just the variety of topics is fascinating. So I hope people are still keeping Discover close to their hearts, because these are fascinating. There's so much work that goes into this. And do you, I say, do you remember? It's still around, but have you read Reader's Digest? Do you remember reading it growing up or anything?
Yeah, I do remember reading it growing up, and like, when I go to my in-laws now, like they're a Reader's Digest family, so I'll flip through it there. Um, but yeah, grew up with Reader's Digest for sure. I also read a lot of gaming magazines, which I'm realizing probably like also helped foster that, like, that love of narrative, because I was like a hungry reader of Game Informer back when I was in high school and in middle school, and would always look forward to that next issue.
It was so much fun. So much fun. And Nintendo Power, RIP.
Hmm.
Oh gosh. With Reader's Digest, they had
Hmm.
a contributing writer named Mary Roach. Have you heard of her?
I have, yeah. I
Okay.
really like her stuff. I read a book by hers. I'm blanking on the title right now, but it's about kind of like endangered animals and like situations where wildlife and people
Fuzz.
collide. Fuzz, yes, thank
I
you.
have that one because I have
Okay,
all her books.
awesome.
That's
That's
yes.
amazing.
Because she went from Reader's Digest, and I remember reading in Reader's Digest her goodbye article how she was going to pursue being a popular science author.
Hmm.
And so, like this book you're talking about with the endangered animals, Fuzz, she's covered other topics too. So she's kind of taken what you're doing, but putting it into very long, long, long form with these
Hmm.
books. She's covered, you were talking about the skeletons and the unethical ways universities might acquire them. She has that book. Oh my gosh. Now I am blanking. Stiff,
Yes, yes.
about the cadavers.
And she's so funny.
She's so engaging. That is an art right
Hmm.
there. Have you read her other books as well?
I
Any
have
other
not.
ones?
No, I've just read most of Fuzz and some of her pieces online. But she's someone who, like, I know just has that narrative like on lock and is really strong at that.
That is awesome. If you have time, I know it's hard, especially with to sit down and dedicate that
Hmm.
time to reading a book or listening to it. But she has some really other good books. Packing for Mars, about space exploration, which you might
Hmm.
like since you worked at NASA. And then she has Grunt, was fascinating, the military science
Oh, cool.
and what soldiers have experienced. I learned a lot from that. It was really funny because she was interviewing someone who was talking about being in the trenches, and if you have to go to the bathroom, if it hits you and it's an
Hmm.
emergency, but there are other people shooting at you or someone could potentially see you from the enemy's side, a lot of people just go right there.
Yeah.
Which blew I guess it makes sense. I hadn't even thought about that. She gets into these details
Right.
that you don't really think about, but are those people's reality.
Right. And like that's so human. That's like, such a yeah, just an entry point into like exactly what it is like to be in that situation that, like, many of us have not been in.
No. And I don't know if you have any favorite authors or journalists that you really admire, but if you do, I'd love to hear about them.
Yeah, definitely. I Someone whose work I've really admired in the past few years is Ed Young, who's an Atlantic writer and journalist. He uh, did a lot of work during the pandemic, kind of did the series of articles for The Atlantic on, where are we at this stage of the pandemic? giving, I think, kind of a much needed evaluation of not just the health and science, but also the policy, and like really analyzing like, how a lot of you know, the reality that we were facing with the pandemic and with the spread, like, were things that started as a result of policy and as a result of politics, and like, did a really wonderful job at like taking these things that are so thorny and complicated, and making them just human and accessible, and like, kind of doing these mile high views that really, um, I think gave me a sense of peace and comfort during the pandemic, when it felt like things were kind of going crazy with various institutions. But being able to read reporting that was so grounding, I think, was really valuable. Um, and I also just love Ed's approach to narrative, to creating a scene. He wrote a book called "I Contain Multitudes," which is all about fungi, um, and is one of those subjects where I think, as an outsider, would be like, I do not want to read a whole book about fungi. How could that hold my attention? And it's one of those things where you get into it, and because he's following the people, he's following the researcher, he is, even following these creatures and trying to find what's the narrative thread here. It makes it really compelling and beautiful. So he's someone who I really, really admire, for sure.
That title alone, I Contain Multitudes. That's so poetic and badass.
I know. Doesn't that totally like just make your former English nerd self like happy?
I love titles of books. I mean, I
Hmm.
don't judge, I don't judge a book by its cover, but a title, a good title, man.
Can say so much.
Even if I haven't, like, there are books I haven't read, but I just think about the titles, like Their Eyes Are Watching God. That's
Hmm.
a captivating title.
Yeah.
Oh
You must feel
gosh.
like you have a sense of what the book is like, the tone, what it's about. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, it's exactly. It's like a first, a first look at someone.
This book, I haven't read it yet. I'm on the waiting list at our local library because I
Hmm.
do buy books. I'm looking at my bookshelf. I had to buy a second bookshelf, and I'm running out of room. And I really want to
Yeah.
support our library. I have some books they don't have, and that's not their fault. They're looking into trying to get them. But I really want to read Jeanette McCurdy's autobiography.
Hmm.
Have you heard of it?
Tell me a bit more. I feel like I have a vague memory of hearing people talking about it.
Okay, so she was on the show iCarly. She was
Yeah.
Sam, the blonde.
Hmm.
She wrote an autobiography called "I'm Glad My Mom Died," and it's, I mean, just that title alone,
Yeah.
it's like, I got to read this. What's going on? And it's a picture of her smiling, and she's holding an urn,
Hmm.
and I think there's like confetti coming out of it. So yeah, that I really want to read it. Apparently, her mom was very verbally abusive, maybe
Sure.
physically abusive. So just again, the title.
I know. No, it's a great title, and like I think I read an excerpt for that that someone like shared on Twitter. Just kind of like,
Oh.
here's a bit of text, and it was like, yeah, as you would expect, like very like gripping and compelling, and the right amount of harrowing for such a serious subject. But yeah, it was. I liked the blurb I get. So if you do end up reading it, you'll have to let me know how it is.
Is there a book? Well, you said Ed Young with the I Contain Multitudes. Is that a book that you couldn't put down? It was that compelling.
Yeah, it was one I really loved reading. I think it feels bad to admit this as a magazine journalist, but there are times when, like, I'm not always as psyched to read like a book of nonfiction as I am to read like, just a fiction work as like a way to unwind. But
Mm-hmm.
there's something so fun and rewarding when you pick up a nonfiction book that doesn't feel like work. It doesn't feel like you're forcing yourself to follow along with the narrative. It's just totally carrying you, and you're not realizing that you're learning all of these new things because you're just so caught up in the journey that writer is taking you on.
That's art for sure,
Yeah.
right there. And speaking of stories, so I don't know if I mentioned yet, I don't think I did, how we met. You had messaged me on Twitter because you listened to another Zelda podcast, which I'm a part of, and you were asking if you could pitch a story idea, actually.
Absolutely.
And do you want to tell people about it a little bit?
Yeah, yeah, I would love to. And that was so fun for me, like, as someone who, has written a lot professionally, and like I am, very, very big gamer. Like it's something that, is probably one of my core hobbies just in terms of what I'm interested in. And I'm, listening to podcasts and reading articles and, like you kind of just, really enjoying all that's out there right now. Um, so this was so fun to get to pitch a story on two of my favorite games in kind of the past 5 years, which are Breath of the Wild, most recent Zelda, and Elden Ring,
Hmm.
which came out this past year. Um, and I got the idea when it was in the opening moments of Elden Ring, and I think I used it in my blog article. But um, the beginning of the game is like almost like a shot for shot. It feels that way, kind of um, remake analog to the beginning of Zelda, where like you run through this big stone door, you lift it open, after crawling out of a tomb, and the world is just kind of open before you. And I kind of talked about a lot of the similarities in how those two games functions as kind of these big open world sandboxes where um, the player's experience is given just as much kind of narrative weight as the cutscenes that you're given. Um, and both games kind of give you a sense of agency and freedom of like you are the one driving this story, just as much as the creators. And that was something that I think you can find in other games, but those two ones just really really struck a chord. So it was tons of fun to be able to think about it and write about it for AZP.
I can tell you had a blast with it. I love that. I haven't played Elden Ring yet. I've played Breath of the Wild, but I haven't played Elden Ring.
Yeah, I mean it's one of those games where like it does live up to the From Software hype about like being very very difficult, but I think I think this one's definitely their most accessible game. Um, they built a lot of systems and mechanics into it to kind of um, ease the difficulty. Like you can continue leveling up and getting more powerful before taking on a boss. So like if you are hitting a roadblock, um, kind of in a similar way to Breath of the Wild, or if you're ever bumping up against one of the divine beasts or a really hard boss out in the overworld, you could just go and get stronger and get more heart pieces and then come back and try again. Uh, yeah, I feel like there's a lot of those kind of mechanics into Elden Ring. So if you were to take the dive with the Dark Souls kind of From Software type of game, that'd be a good one to start with.
I need more time in the day, Alex. I need so much time.
I was talking with a coworker last night. My backlog is so real of all the games I want to play.
So what? Okay, so what are you playing now? If are you playing anything right now?
I am playing something right now. Yeah, I'm playing a few things. I am halfway through God of War Ragnarok right now,
Okay,
which I'm really really loving. Like, we've been talking about narrative and storytelling this whole time,
it's
and
good. It's
it's
good.
it's so good. It's one of those games that makes you kind of sit back and go like, holy shit, you can tell this kind of story in a video game,
Mm.
just because it's very cinematic. It's very very high budget, but there's also like almost like this auteur lens to it where you are like following the camera so closely. It's you're watching a movie as you're playing it, and I always love those kinds of cinematic games. So I'm very into that when I get a chance to play it for sure.
That's awesome. And I think I know the answer to this one. What game are you looking forward to in 2023?
Yeah, I mean it's got to be Tears of the Kingdom. And I feel like, it's been such an emotional journey to be a Zelda fan between Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, just because so much time has passed. It feels like we're in a totally different world now. And I am still ready to like get back to Hyrule and like um, I'm so excited to see how they recontextualize the map because I know it's going to be the same basic map, but now there are these floating pillars. So like how does that mess with the geography and like what is the experience going to be like of moving through and these little breadcrumbs we've gotten for the story as Ocarina of Time fanboy, at heart. Like I'm so excited to see like they're teasing Ganondorf, they're teasing like little lore and continuity threads between like Ocarina and Twilight Princess and these newer games that almost kind of wipe the slate clean, but also didn't at the same time. So yeah, it's gonna be a good day when that releases. I'm gonna have to tell Rachel, my wife, like next days are gonna be a little busy. I'm gonna be invested here.
I think I want to treat it the same way I treated Breath of the Wild. So that was in 2017.
Hmm.
And I wasn't really on. I had made a Twitter account, but I wasn't really using it. I started using it again more in 2019, 2020 when I joined AZP and then Boss Rush. And I sure I had Facebook and Instagram, but I remember just taking my time with it
Hmm.
and not being overloaded with people's opinions about it. I don't know, this purity to it,
Hmm.
that experience. I'm hoping for that again with Tears of the Kingdom, so I might be MIA for a little
Yeah,
while.
I like it. See, that's where I feel like I want to be at, where like, I don't read any like things online or watch any reviews and like go in totally blind and have like, the pure unfiltered experience. But then there's the part of me that just like, really likes game reviews and criticism and like just can't help myself
Mm.
from like reading what people are saying. So I might dip a few toes in before it comes out, but then I do also like to kind of go dark for a little bit to like experience it myself before, then you kind of check back in and say, oh, what is the critical community saying? What are my podcasts and like, writers who I follow, saying and thinking? And that's always fun to like, you almost get to re-experience it through other people's eyes in that way.
So you said re-experience. So do you prefer to listen to things like that and seek out uh, critiques after you've played a game, or do you prefer to do that prior to a game, or even while you're playing a game?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of mix it up. Like for
Okay.
something like Zelda, I would probably want to do it after, just because I think like you, like I want that experience where it's just me in the game before like I tune in to what everyone else is saying. Um, but then there are other games like, for instance, right now I'm playing Final Fantasy VII on the Switch for the first time, the original. And as kind of someone who grew up with the N64 and Mario and Zelda, like I was never really into PlayStation or the Final Fantasy games, so it's been really fun to experience that like in 2022 as an adult for the first time. Um, but while I'm playing it, I'm also kind of, um, reading articles on it. Polygon did this amazing kind of long form article on, they call it an oral history of Final Fantasy VII. And they went back and they interviewed a lot of these, kind of famously tight-lipped Japanese developers who don't, often speak with the media, and gave them a lot of access onto like the creative process and what it was like developing, what it was like hearing the reception. There's like an epilogue on like how they feel about the game since, and that's been fun to like kind of slowly read as I'm playing, and like some of my podcasts I listen to. Um, One I really like, in addition to AZP, is called Wizard and the Bruiser,
Ooh.
and they're kind of they do a deep dive into like different aspects of nerd culture. So each episode will have like a different um, will be about a different topic. So they did an episode on God of War recently for the new game coming out. They did like a three-parter on Zelda, back in 2018 when they first started. Um,
Wow.
but they also would do an episode on Green Day, because that has kind of like, it like hurts my heart as a millennial, but like now that's kind of become almost nostalgic and like a part of nerd
Ooh.
culture. So like
Blink 182's on tour.
I know
Oh
they're back.
god.
It all cycles back, Celeste.
I know. I know. I think Paramore's on tour as well.
Mhm.
Gosh, that's a little bit more recent than those two, but still, just I I follow some of those like millennial accounts. I'm 33,
Mhm.
and I
I
follow
am
some of those.
too.
Oh, 89, baby.
Yep, 89 baby.
All
March.
right. Oh, I'm January.
Nice, close.
So yeah, I gained so much wisdom in those 2 months before you showed up. I follow those like some of these millennial Instagram pages, and like, yeah, we really did that to our hair, and yeah, we really thought that was a look. But
Hmm.
I had sometimes I don't like to make fun too much. Like, yeah, and a lighthearted fun, but I do remember just how much fun I had. Like, I was
Yes.
really into the Twilight books when I was in high school because
Hmm.
I think the first one came out in like 2005, 2006. And then just when that last one came out, going to a midnight book release and
Hmm.
people are dressing up like the characters, just having something to look forward to, something,
Yes.
I don't know, like, I don't, life is what you make it, and you make the magic of your life, but it's really easy to get bogged down and all these just, I don't know, oh, now I have to think about renewing my car insurance. Now I have to
Hmm.
think about deductibles, and I don't know. What are some things you looked forward to, like any kind of midnight book releases or
Yeah, no, that's I
games?
love that question. I totally did the midnight releases for the last three Harry Potter books. That was always super fun, like going with a bunch of my friends and we wait in line and you get back at like 12:30 and you read the first few chapters and that was always very fun. Um, I I don't even know if they were doing midnight releases then, but like when when we were in elementary school, middle school, when the Lord of the Rings movies came out, those were big event movies for like me and like my friends. So, like we'd see them like opening day in theaters. Um, those were something that like I get very hyped about leading up to it. Um, and then yeah, I mean even big games like I remember sitting in the theaters. This is like weirdly this became like one of those core memories that you remember so vividly. But I was seeing Bedazzled, the movie with Brendan Fraser and
Oh,
Elizabeth Hurley, and like
wow.
yeah, I know I feel like it's a deep cut, but like
That is a deep cut. I've never seen it.
yeah. And it's like it's about a guy who sells his soul to the devil, gets three wishes, and they all like turn out to kind of, work against him in various ways. But that wasn't the part that lodged its way into my brain. It was seeing a cinematic trailer for Majora's Mask on the big screen. And I feel like I've looked for this on YouTube, and I almost want to like have you like put your feelers out to the AZP community and like see if we can track
I
this
have an
down.
assignment. I have an
Yep.
assignment.
Like I can't find it on YouTube, but like I remember seeing this like cinematic trailer with the moon like slowly approaching Hyrule and like seeing it overhead, and it was I remember it being having similar graphics to the Ocarina of Time trailer that came out. That was um, like very cinematic, but it was just wild seeing that in theaters, and I was so ready for that game when it came out. Uh,
Do you like Majora's Mask?
I love Majora's Mask. Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you. That's the only right answer. I
I
love it.
yeah, it might be like it's kind of my dark horse favorite Zelda. Like if someone asks you what is your favorite game of all time, it's got to be Ocarina because that's just too too near and dear to my heart. But if I had to pick, like if someone was like, yeah, what about the other games? It'd probably be Majora's because I just love the symbolism. I love the storytelling. I love how weird it gets. It gets like so unapologetically weird with all of its various subplots in a way that like maybe Link's Awakening with some of the weird stuff you do in that game, but Majora's Mask just I love how kooky and sincere and emotional. Yeah, it's a gem for sure, even among the Zeldas.
I I love doing this. Like when you're talking about symbolism, I love. Did you ever do this? Like you'd wear a mask as young Link and go back to the Happy Mask salesman and wear it while talking to him, and he'd tell you what it represents.
I never did that. That
you
is
Now you got to go
amazing.
back. You got to go
Yep.
back and play.
I mean, now
So
that it's out on the Switch on the Virtual Console, like I've been wanting to replay because I replayed Ocarina either last year or the year before. So I think I will be going back to Termina at some point in 2023. I got a feeling that's going to be up there on my games.
oh gosh, I don't remember each one, but as you get the mask, I don't not like the giant's mask because you can only use that when you're battling that creature in Ikana Canyon, Ikana Castle,
Hmm.
I believe. Yeah, because you have to turn it on. I can't remember the name of the monster. It's like this it's a worm,
Yeah, I
sandworm
can
thing.
picture it in my brain.
Yeah. But if you go talk to the Happy Mask salesman on whatever day, he'll say, I don't know, if you wear the couple's mask, like, oh, this represents the love a couple feels, or something like that. Just very sincere, very heartwarming
Hmm.
moments. And like even some of the more grotesque masks, he'll say something that makes you think, oh, that's really sweet. The one I like is it Camaro? Is the dancer. The
Oh, yes,
one
yes. I don't remember the name, but I know Camaro might be right.
I'm so sorry if I got it wrong, but you teach the Rosa sisters his dance with his mask. But if you
Hmm.
show the mask while you're wearing it to the Happy Mask salesman, he says something like, "This mask represents the pride and joy a teacher feels with a good student,"
I love
and
that.
that was just
That's
so
so great.
sweet.
Yeah.
Because you think back to teachers and professors who made an
Hmm.
impact on you, and I don't know, just really touched me.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. And I feel like it also works on another level where it's kind of like the developers being meta about like we made a very symbolic game. Like, you can interpret this metaphorically, like,
Oh
and all the cool
yeah.
readings people have done about like Majora's Mask and grief. Like AZP did that incredible episode that like really kind of fleshed out, different wit like lenses to look at that game. So I like that they even, you know, maybe thumbed their nose at that a little bit with the Happy Mask Salesman.
Oh God, I love that game. If you have not played it and you're listening, don't let the 3 day time period thing upset you. It's To be honest, I know people make that out as like the biggest element of the game. To be honest, to me,
Hmm.
it's secondary. I
Yeah.
don't. Yeah, sure. Okay, now it's an inconvenience. I have to go reset and start again, whatever. But just the richness of the development of the side characters and
Hmm.
the side quest. If you like side quests, this is your game. And I'm a
Yeah.
bit. Are you a side quest person?
I totally am a side quest person. I am taking longer to play God of War than I thought because every time a new side quest pops up in my queue, I'm gonna play it because I think that's where some of the best stories get tucked away in games when like developers, they almost are more constrained because it's like, oh, I just have this little bitty bite-sized story. Let me make it really, it's kind of like the difference between like a short story and a novel. A side
Mm-hmm.
quest can be like something that's just this really great little nugget of a story or a narrative.
That's a beautiful analogy, a short story or a novel, because there are so many great short stories out there that I think about often.
Hmm.
And I probably remember a little bit better because they're short.
Right.
But Alex, is do you have any future plans either with maybe personal life that you'd like to share or your profession with hobbies you want to pick up, anything that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, professionally, I think there might be a time in the future where I try kind of seeing what it is like as a freelancer, and trying to kind of pitch stories to different publications and you know kind of build a career as an independent professional, like can make my own schedule kind of thing, but also I can pick the kind of stories I want to work on, and that just seems really nice and rewarding and like a fun way to keep doing what I'm doing, but also, challenge myself in new ways. So I wouldn't say that's immediate future, but it's an exciting thing to think about and know that if and when I am ready to move on from Discover and editing, there is kind of a path back to writing and back to long form and narrative journalism as a writer. Um, and then yeah, I mean, I definitely want to carve out time to keep gaming in 2023, and I think hopefully just continuing to enjoy kind of the gaming community. I feel like it's something I've really just started tapping into now through following a lot of uh, game developers on Twitter, a lot of game journalists, and a lot of content creators and fans like you who are all contributing to. There's just so much fun content out there right now. As a gamer, so I want to keep reading articles. I want to keep listening to podcasts and, hopefully, trying my hand at a few more kind of game stories that I write myself, maybe maybe for AZP Zelda blog that we might talk about in a few weeks.
Yes, please. Like, yeah, please. I would love to know more ideas. It's I think I've mentioned this, I don't know if to you or other people, but it can be a little constraining, like coming up with ideas when you're
Hmm.
focusing on one game series. But miraculously, people keep coming up with topics for these articles.
Yeah. I wonder if it's one of those things where it's like you're constrained, so that almost gives you more to play with because it's like, well, I can only talk about this one game series, but I can talk about anything I want within that. So, maybe that gives you freedom to really come up with fun articles. Like I'm trying to remember the most recent one that y'all posted.
Oh, Mallory's about the
Yes,
pets.
yes, Mallory's one about the pets, and that was so much fun, and it's such a great it's such a great angle for a post and for a story because yeah, just everyone has that thought. Everyone plays a game and thinks about like what animal would make like a cool pet or how would I interact with a cuckoo in real life, and it's just
Oh.
it's very fun.
Don't hit them. That's how I
Yes,
would for
yeah,
sure interact with
yeah,
them, is
yeah.
not hit them with
I
a
think I
sword.
think that's the takeaway.
Well, Alex, where can people support you? How should they support you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can follow me on Twitter, Alex _E _Orlando is my username there, and you can also just Google me and follow either my personal website or my author byline at Discover for any new stories I'm working on.
Is there anything we did not cover? Because I feel like we could talk for probably like 10 more hours about all the things. Like, come on
Absolutely.
over. Come on over. We'll have some eggnog. We'll play Zelda. We'll play
Hmm.
different games. Is there anything we forgot to talk
No, I think
about?
I think this was great. I think we nailed it. Thank you so much for like giving me some time to just chat and talk about journalism and games and all the fun stuff I'm interested in. This was a blast.
I love it. I'm so happy that you were able to make time, and I'm so happy that you got married and you're in. Okay, when you said like, "Oh, I love the reminder of the ring on my finger." I'm sure say that to Rachel. She'll probably melt.
I will save that for later for sure.
Well, everyone, thank you so much for listening. And please do follow Alex, where he said he can be found. And you can find other 1v1 interviews at bossrush.net. And you can follow me, Celeste, on Twitter at FairyCrypt, FAERIECRYPT. So until next time, we'll talk to y'all later. Thanks, everyone. Bye, guys.